We have about 5 million members now.
They are incredibly powerful. They intimidate people.
It's not about guns, it's about freedom.
This has gone on too long, and it's time the entire country stood up against the NRA.
No, they don't have to be afraid of the NRA.
The National Rifle Association, better known as the NRA, is America's biggest non-profit organisation advocating gun rights. It was established in the 19th century, and many former presidents of the US have been members of the organisation. David Keene was the NRA's president from 2011 to 2013. He successfully led the organisation in foiling attempts by the US government to control guns.
Who does NRA represent?
We represent gun owners, sportsmen, collectors, hunters, competitive shooters in this country. As I said, we have about 5 million members now. They're not all gun owners. There are a lot of people who join the NRA because they believe that we're very effective.
Does it have a so-called mission statement?
Our mission statement is to protect the Second Amendment and the rights of Americans to keep and bear arms, which is guaranteed in the Second Amendment of the Constitution.
The Second Amendment to the US Constitution was adopted in 1791. It protects the right of the people to keep and bear arms. At the NRA headquarters, the only place open to the public is a museum of firearms. And a copy of the Second Amendment is proudly displayed at the museum.
The Second Amendment in full, the text is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now that's in the Bill of Rights, so it's a constitutional guarantee that everybody has.
But circumstances have changed with the passage of time. The Second Amendment was adopted more than 200 years ago and has become controversial in today's modern world.
Big debate about what the militia entails and who's in the militia. When the amendment was written in the late 1700s, the concern that the framers of the Constitution had was that they were establishing this new national government. It's far more powerful than what they had before, and they were concerned with specifically giving it control over a standing army, which is something we hadn't had before.
What the founders were afraid of is that the national government, the new national government, would disarm the individuals who make up the militia. So the way it preserves the militia is by preserving the rights of the individual to have a gun in order to make up the militia.
And that was the reading which I think prevailed really for 200 years. The other view, the competing view, is that it's not just about organized militias, it's about the so-called general militia, meaning everybody, or that it's about an individual right to keep and bear arms against, for example, criminals and other threats to safety.
For years that debate went on, and then in a very important Supreme Court decision a few years ago in which a private individual in the District of Columbia, our capital, challenged the ban on his having a firearm in his home to protect himself. The Supreme Court, in a lengthy opinion, went into it and said, no, the founders meant what the founders said. It meant that individual Americans have a right to keep and bear arms, in this case for defense. And that was the first definitive statement from the Supreme Court on the issue and is now the controlling law.
Although the Supreme Court made the final decision in the landmark case of District of Columbia versus Heller, it didn't end the controversy, and the debate is still raging on.
In that same decision, the court clearly signaled that lots of gun regulations that we already have would be fine, that they would not be unconstitutional, that they would be valid under this new interpretation.
Constitutional rights are not absolute. They're all subject to regulation. Free speech is subject to regulation, religion, so on and so forth. The question is, what can we still regulate? And the Supreme Court said very clearly in the Heller case, you can still have certain kinds of gun regulation. You can keep guns away from felons, from the mentally ill. You can ban dangerous and unusual weapons. You can keep weapons out of sensitive places like government buildings. And so the legal constitutional debate now is really about what other kinds of regulations are permissible.
The NRA is convinced, many of its members, that somebody's going to come grab your guns.
In Obama's terms, the US government has put in place the strictest ever gun control measures. including background checks for all gun buyers. But in the face of resistance from organisations such as the NRA, the White House has failed to enhance such controls through legislation.
Why are American politicians so afraid of that organization?
So for American politicians, one of the most important goals is to make sure that they get reelected. The National Rifle Association is organized in such a way that they have voters in every congressional district, and they're organized in every congressional district and in every state, and they're willing to show up at the meetings that politicians hold with their constituents. They're willing to vote solely on this issue.
We send to our members a little orange card that grades their candidates. And our members and the people that look to us for leadership trust us. And they say, if this fellow is somebody who supports the Second Amendment, we'll vote for him. And if he doesn't support the Second Amendment, we won't.
Guns don't kill people, people kill people. That's the NRA's most famous slogan. Some people may say it sounds reasonable, but frequent attacks have prompted many others to question it.
If you and I get in an argument and I punch you, you're very unlikely to die. If I shoot you, you're very likely to die. So it's not that, so people kill people with guns is a more accurate way to state that.
And with mass shootings becoming a regular event in the US, the debate is expected to continue for some time to come.